Saludos a todos, es Ferrariman601. Bienvenidos al comentario en directo del Gran Premio de España de 2018. Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to the live commentary stream for the 2018 Spanish Grand Prix from the Catalunya circuit just outside Barcelona, Spain. We have a very interesting race in store for ourselves today here. First and foremost, though, the qualifying order. Yesterday's qualifying session punctuated by absolutely huge lap times from the front runners. In pole position, car number 44, the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton, a 1:16.173 around this Catalunya circuit. That is an all-out lap record around this place. In second place, his teammate Valtteri Bottas with a 1:16.213. Less than half a tenth behind Lewis Hamilton is Valtteri Bottas. In P3 is Sebastian Vettel in the first of the Ferraris with a 1:16.305. In P4, Kimi Räikkönen in the second Ferrari, a 1:16.612. These lap times in the top 4 and top 5 runners, Max Verstappen here in P5 with a 1:16.816. These lap times are ridiculously quick. We've never seen Formula 1 cars lapping this place in these sorts of times before. It is amazing to watch. In P6 is Daniel Ricciardo with a 1:16.818. P7, a brilliant effort for Kevin Magnussen in the number 20 Haas car, a 1:17.676. Think about that. The gap between 6th and 7th place on the grid, almost a full second. It's about 0.8 of a second there between P6 and P7. Fernando Alonso, the native son of Spain, here in P8, a 1:17.721. McLaren's updates effectively yielding a B-spec car for this weekend, certainly paying dividends so far. They are no longer very slow in a straight line. P9, Carlos Sainz in the first of the Renaults, another native Spaniard here, a 1:17.790. That must be a thrill for him to start right behind Fernando Alonso in his home Grand Prix. P10, Romain Grosjean in the second Haas, a 1:17.835. Our Q2 finishers from qualifying, Stoffel van Dorn in the second McLaren with a 1:18.323. P12 for Pierre Gasly in the first of the Toro Rossos, a 1:18.463. Esteban Ocon in the first of the Force Indias, in P13, a 1:18.696, and Charles Leclerc in the first of the Saubers, P14, 1:18.910. That young Monegasque career definitely beginning to take off. Sergio Perez in the second Force India is P15 with a 1:19.098. Nico Hülkenberg in the second Renault, P16, a 1:18.923. P17, Marcus Ericsson in the second Sauber, a 1:19.493. Lance Stroll in the first of the Williams cars, a 1:20.225. Sergei Sirotkin in P19 in the second Williams, a 1:19.695. And technically speaking, not posting a time in qualifying is Brendan Hartley in the Toro Rosso, P20. He has no time on the board for qualifying due to a big crash in FP3 earlier in the morning on Saturday, which completely ripped the rear end off of the Toro Rosso. It was so badly damaged that when the marshals went to recover the car, the engine fell out. So, needless to say, Toro Rosso could not get Hartley out in qualifying. That was an absolutely crazy amount of damage on that car. We'll see if he's even able to take the start today. I assume he will be, but that would be a big job to rebuild that car. Hello to everybody who has joined us here today. How are we today? And what do we think about the race which is imminent? Yes, absolutely. We do have a good weekend of racing in store for us here. Jonathan Straitman, unfortunately, here in the United States, we don't get to see any of the historic races at Monaco, but definitely they are really cool to watch, and, well, I definitely wish that I could see them. The Nürburgring 24 Hours, we have the LMP race at Monza. Yeah, we've definitely got a very good racing weekend. However, the big racing weekend for us in the United States is a couple of weeks away when we have the Monaco Grand Prix in the morning, and we have the Indy 500 in the afternoon, and then at the end we have the longest NASCAR race of the year. So 3 world-class events on Memorial Day, as it were, here in the United States as well, the last Sunday in May. Yona, I will definitely give you another shameless plug here. Yona is one of my loyal fans, and she is one of our chief botherances on Twitter. However, she is a bit of a writer, so if you want to check out her fan fiction based on Star Wars, some F1 fan fiction as well, if you've got some spare time and you like to read, go check out her work. Yona, you can post a link to it in the chat here if you want. Meanwhile, Sky Sports here simulcasting on ESPN. Christian Horner being asked about the comportment of his drivers in Azerbaijan and have you instituted any sort of team orders? Basically, Christian Horner being tight-lipped as he was in Azerbaijan, saying they know the rules and they're trying to race the cars in front of them. We'll see how that works out. Brendan Hartley here, we're catching up with him on the grid now. He is going to be starting this race, obviously from P20, but they have fixed that car for him, and hopefully it holds together, literally speaking. I've never seen the engine fall out of a Formula One car before, yet it happened yesterday morning in FP3. Gah, YouTube saying no to links. Well, that's annoying. Jonathan Straitman, I'm pretty sure it was the entire engine and gearbox assembly that came out the back of that car. If you watch the video, you see as it's up, actually it's up rather high in the air on the crane. All of a sudden, a big chunk of something just falls out the back of it. It looked a bit too large to be only the gearbox. We're coming up to about 6 minutes to go now before the start of the formation lap. The pre-grid, of course, is a beehive of activity, as it always is. Everybody making final checks and preparations to the cars. Drivers are already getting in a lot of cases. We're looking at Lewis Hamilton here, our pole sitter. He is being belted in as we speak. The Mercedes mechanics are fettling that car up to the last moment. Fernando is starting P8 today. That's a very good qualifying effort on his part. He is definitely lifting that McLaren into places where it still really has no business being. Van Dorn, his teammate, is in P11. Do we have any predictions for today's race? I do have to say I'm expecting the Mercedes to run away unless something can happen on the start. Sebastian Vettel there starting right behind Lewis Hamilton on the grid. He is in P3, obviously. He'll have to get by Valtteri Bottas if he's going to challenge Hamilton into turn 1 off the start, but we have seen stranger things happen, especially here in the Spanish Grand Prix. I have to say, the Spanish Grand Prix is one of my favorite races of the year. It's the official start of the European season. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix, of course, 2 weeks ago, we saw what Sebastian Vettel can do. He controlled that race pretty much from the word go. However, that late safety car, and then that ill-thought move on Valtteri Bottas right on the restart. That sealed his fate and allowed Lewis Hamilton to take the victory after a puncture suffered by Valtteri Bottas, who was sure to win the race after that restart. However, we shall see what the German Ferrari driver can do here in Spain. Jonathan Straitman, what do I think of the B-Spec McLaren? I really do like it. I especially like the treatment that they have done on the nose, both on the nose tip as well, those canard wings along the sides of the nose on the low side there, right where it meets up with the front wing main plane. The B-Spec car looks like it's aggressive. It looks like they've spent a lot of time trying to funnel air toward the rear end, and I think it's going to be effective. I don't know for sure if they have solved their drag problem because they're not exactly the fastest in the speed traps. However, straight line speed is not all that important on many Formula One circuits, so we'll see what Fernando Alonso in particular is able to do with that car. We know that he is absolutely a fantastic driver. By the way, in case you were not aware, Fernando Alonso, in his LMP1 debut last weekend at Spa, in the 6 hours of Spa in the World Endurance Championship, he won the race with his Toyota teammates. So Fernando Alonso actually just won his first race in quite a long time, albeit in an LMP1 car. Sky Sports here, just replaying some highlights of Spanish Grand Prix of the past. We're watching Rubens Barrichello fighting Michael Schumacher and Ralf Schumacher back in the year 2000. We already saw 2016 when the two Mercedes drivers of Hamilton and Rosberg at the time took each other out at turn 4. Yes, the Spanish Grand Prix has been host to some very exciting and wild races in the past. We'll see if we're in store for one of those today. I don't believe there's any chance of rain for this race, as we seem to have bright sunshine dominating the circuit right now. There were some scattered cumulus clouds from some of the shots that I've already seen. However, everything seems to be pretty well under control weather-wise. Jack Barlow, which one do I recommend for Assetto Corsa? The Kunos F2004 or the ASR F2004? It's got to be the Kunos F2004. ASR did a great job on theirs, but the Kunos one, it's just better. It's flat out better. Mostly it's down to the tire model, I think. The Kunos car does have a little bit less power than the ASR version, and it's a little bit harder to set up. But once you do figure it out, it's just as fast, if not a little bit quicker, actually. Honestly, I'll remember the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix not for the Mercedes taking each other out, but for the brilliant display that Max Verstappen put on at the end of that race, holding off Kimi Räikkönen for the win. That was spectacular. Yes, that 2016 Spanish Grand Prix was Max Verstappen's first race with the Red Bull team. He had just been promoted from Toro Rosso due to the departure, or the demotion rather, of Daniel Kvyat, who was driving that Red Bull car at the start of 2016. Kvyat got the boot from Red Bull, relegated down to Toro Rosso. Verstappen took Kvyat's seat, and it promptly won the first race. So, yes, that was not a good day if you're Daniel Kvyat. At this point, it is 9 past the hour. The grid is being cleared. Most of the cars and drivers are now out on their own. Cameras picking up Fernando Alonso there in P8. He will definitely be in a good mood after winning the 6 hours of Spa with Toyota. And we were just remarking about the weather. This wide shot looking down the start-finish straight. I do see some dark clouds overhead, and they are quite low-hanging. Race control saying risk of rain for this session is 80%. I don't know if I quite agree with that. But as the clock ticks through 10 past the hour in just a few seconds and the formation lap gets underway, green lights and the formation lap is underway, perhaps all is not settled there on the weather front here in Barcelona. The formation lap is underway. I do believe all the cars have just gotten off the grid now. Obviously, the Mercedes of Hamilton and Bottas leading the field through turns 1 and 2 as we get the formation lap started. On board with Lewis Hamilton heading through turn 4 and now turn 5. He is definitely getting off with this formation lap. He's almost running at racing speeds here. Race control and FOM graphics running the driver's standings there on the left-hand side of the screen for the moment. Formation lap has already passed through Sector 1. Lewis Hamilton now has slowed right down for turns 6 and 7 here. Valtteri Bottas right on his gearbox. We're right on board with Sebastian Vettel at the moment. Hopefully Ferrari don't have any engine troubles. Kimi Räikkönen had an engine failure on Friday, I believe it was. Definitely seemed like there was some sort of a turbo malfunction in that. Lots of smoke pouring out the back of that Ferrari, but obviously he is running right now. Hopefully all is well on board the 71H. The field just running through turn 9 and coming up to turn 10 as we begin Sector 3 of this formation lap. The Catalunya circuit, it is one that we all know very well. It is the most popular Formula One testing venue, and also it has been reproduced in many racing sims and other video games since its inception in 1991 when it hosted its first round of the World Championship. This whole circuit actually was constructed as part of the push by Spain and the Catalan government to host the 1992 Olympic Summer Games in Barcelona, so just adding a little bit of urban ambiance there with this circuit, and it's been on the Formula One calendar ever since then. Those classic shots of Ayrton Senna going wheel-to-wheel with Nigel Mansell, that happened here back in 1991. Jack Barlow, in terms of racing sims, my least favorite Ferrari F1 car to drive is the SF15T. My favorite one, it's pretty much an even split between the F2004 and the SF70H. They're both brilliant cars. Anyway, the grid is now forming. Hamilton and Bottas have now formed up in their respective starting positions. Vettel and Räikkönen stopping behind them. We're waiting for the rest of the field to make it through the final corner and take their positions. Some stern faces looking on in the McLaren pits. And we just have about 4 cars remaining to take their grid slots. We have a Sauber, a Williams, another Williams, and Brendan Hartley in that Toro Rosso in the final grid slot. They have both stopped in their positions. The medical car is at the back of the field. The green flag is up. The lights are coming on. 5 lights on. Pause. 5 lights off, and we are go in the 2018 Spanish Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas getting pretty even starts across the front row of the grid. Sebastian Vettel making a good start, trying to defend against his teammate. He's going wide into turn 1. However, he is behind Lewis Hamilton. He manages to get alongside Valtteri Bottas into turn 1, and it appears that Vettel has fended off Bottas through turn 2. Vettel now in P2. We have some action at the back there. Does not appear to be any significant contact. However, it does appear everybody makes it through turns 1 and 2 unscathed. We got some smoke at the back, and we have an incident of some kind. Lots of smoke and debris. It is a Haas car. I do believe that is Romain Grosjean already, and it is. Romain Grosjean out of the race. We also have a Renault which has been hit. It is missing its left rear wheel. The safety car has been deployed. Nico Hülkenberg was that Renault that was hit. I presume Grosjean and Hülkenberg got together. Grosjean lost it through turn 3. He's trying to pirouette the car around. Nico Hülkenberg runs in the back of him, I see. Completely loses his left rear wheel. There was a Toro Rosso also involved in that scrap. It's unclear whether that Toro Rosso suffered any significant damage. Trying to identify the Toro Rosso involved. The Toro Rosso is also out of the race. Left front suspension damage there. I cannot identify that car at the moment. That is Pierre Gasly out in the Toro Rosso. He is still in the car. Unclear if he's been injured. He's moving around in the cockpit. He's just slow to get out. Perhaps he's just in a state of shock here. Romain Grosjean has exited the Haas and he is walking back to the pits. And again, we are under safety car here on lap 1 in Spain. Nico Hülkenberg has gotten out of the Renault. Our race order is frozen under the safety car. Hamilton leading Vettel from Bottas, Raikkonen, Verstappen, your top 5. Ricciardo in 6th, Magnussen in P7, Sainz P8, Charles Leclerc in P9, Esteban Ocon in P10, Fernando Alonso has dropped down to P11, Stoffel Van Dorn in P14, Hartley and Sirotkin being shown in the pits, Hulkenberg, Gasly, and Grosjean being classified as stopped on track. We're waiting the status on Brendan Hartley and Sergei Sirotkin. I don't know if they were involved in that incident at all. I didn't see that on any replays. Brendan Hartley being classed as out of the pits, as is Sirotkin. So Hartley and Sirotkin are still in the race. Norman Robinson. Good morning, Bermuda. Watching an aerial replay of the start here. Pretty even getaway from both of the Ferraris. Hamilton got a slight jump on Bottas off the line. However, Vettel tucks into the slipstream of Valtteri Bottas. Kimi Raikkonen wants to come to play as well. He can't quite make it work before turn 1. However, Vettel around the outside into turn 1 makes relatively easy work of Valtteri Bottas. They came very close there in turn 2. However, I don't believe there was contact. Vettel consolidates that gap over Bottas immediately. At the back, we lose the replay on board with Sebastian Vettel on the start. He got that start absolutely hooked up. Great launch, and then as the second phase of the clutch release happened, there really wasn't much chatter, not much wheel spin. Great start by Sebastian Vettel, and again, down the outside into turn 1 around Valtteri Bottas to consolidate that second place. The safety car restart will be interesting. It does appear, watching what happened to Romain Grosjean, it does appear that the track surface is a bit green. On board with Grosjean now, I'm seeing his front tires flexing about wildly. Tire pressures are very low, and I presume that is due to the track being rather green because it did rain overnight. Grosjean getting absolutely belted there by Nico Hulkenberg as he's pirouetting that Haas around. He had his foot buried in the throttle, lots of smoke coming up from those rear tires as you would expect. I'm not quite sure why he decided to do that. There's no reason to bury the throttle in one of these cars to keep the engine running. The anti-stall will kick in no matter what gear you're in. Grosjean, however, perhaps just an instinctual reaction to spin up the rear tires. Nico Hulkenberg ran into him effectively blind, as did Pierre Gasly. Sim Racing 604. Good morning, Mike. I don't want to think about what time it is there in Western Canada. On board with Pierre Gasly here, going into turn 1, very close with the Force India and one of the Saubers there. He manages to thread the needle through that mess. However, Grosjean in front of him loses it right about now. There's the smoke screen. Hulkenberg is immediately in front of Gasly. Hulkenberg and Gasly both hit Grosjean. I was thinking perhaps Gasly hit Hulkenberg in the melee, but no, Gasly and Hulkenberg both hit Grosjean. They could not see him through that smoke screen. Yes, Norman Robinson. It is also Mother's Day here in the United States. Alain Prost there looking on from the Renault pits. He's not looking particularly amused. One of his cars already out of the race. The Haas of Romain Grosjean is still sitting where Grosjean parked it. It's going to be a long time to recover that car, I'm going to say. It's in a weird spot there. It's right in the middle of turn 3. It's on the inside line, but it's not particularly easy to get a crane to that part of the circuit particularly quickly. Working lap 3 of 66. The safety car is still out. The field is neutralized. Everybody who was running at the time of the safety car deployment is still running. Sergei Sirotkin, the last car running in P17. Felipe Massa looking on from the Williams pits. Certainly he is wishing he could be in that car right now. Perhaps Williams will call him back into service yet again, given the state of their drivers this year. The crane now coming onto the circuit to lift the car of Romain Grosjean. Hopefully the engine doesn't fall out of this one. Drivers are already saying the safety car needs to speed up a little bit. On board with the safety car, they are definitely pushing that thing. However, it is a road car, and we're talking about Formula One cars here. 10/10ths in a road car is still only about 30% in a Formula One car. Camera's picking up Pierre Gasly on the back of the motorcycle being shuttled back to the pit lane. In years gone by, when there were incidents like these at the start, it was not uncommon to see the race abandoned and then restarted with another formation lap and then another start. Back in those days, and I'm talking as recently as 2004 or 2005, teams used to have a fully built-up spare car. Some of the bigger teams even had 2 spare cars that were available to either one of their drivers should they be taken out in a Turn 1 incident like this. However, cost-cutting measures that were instituted since have pretty much deleted the days of the spare car, and the teams only have their 2 race cars available to their drivers at a Grand Prix weekend. Working lap 4 as the field comes down into turn 9. The safety car still leads. Some interesting comments here about the safety car. Yes, it is fast, but obviously it's not quite fast enough sometimes for these Formula One cars to maintain tire and brake temperature. What else could we use as the safety car? If we want to maintain the Mercedes presence in the safety car and medical car lineup, perhaps, and I know that this is a long shot, but why couldn't they use one of those AMG Project 1 hypercars with the Formula 1 engine in the back? That should be plenty fast enough. Ayrton, that's actually not a bad idea. I've thought of that as well. Why couldn't you use a race car of some sort as the safety car? Why couldn't you even use an old Formula One car as the safety car? If you don't need to keep the speeds particularly low and marshals are, say, working quite a long ways off the circuit, why couldn't you use that as the safety car? There are actually a couple of older F1 cars that do follow the F1 circus around as they travel around the world to the different circuits. They are both ex-Tyrrell V10 Formula 1 cars that are used as part of the 2-seater experiences that you can buy for quite the pretty penny. But they are fully fledged Formula 1 cars. They've got their race engines in them, and I do imagine that they'd be able to do lap times if you really strung them out. They would be probably maybe only 8 seconds or so off the pace of these qualifying times that we're seeing in 2018. Could you use one of them as the safety car? Who knows? Hamilton and Vettel both getting on the radio complaining about the level of debris still on the circuit there, particularly through turn 3. This is going to be still a long effort to clean this up. Currently working lap 5 of 66. The safety car has been out now for 4 laps. The official word is the Turn 3 incident involving Car 8, that is Romain Grosjean, will be investigated after the race. Just watching some of the flags around the circuit, the wind has really picked up around here all of a sudden. It is blowing pretty much head-on through Turn 3, the exit of Turn 3. That's going to be playing havoc with the grip levels through that very fast corner in qualifying, easy flat out in these cars. We do have dark clouds there in the background, and race control said that we have an 80% chance of rain during this session. This is a long way from over, guys. Meanwhile, race control announcing that the safety car period is ending at the end of this lap. We are working lap 6 here. Lewis Hamilton still hounding the safety car down the back straight here. We're expecting him to back off at any moment and become the de facto safety car up through the final corner of the lap, at which point he will decide to give it the beans and try to get a jump on Sebastian Vettel at the restart. 2 weeks ago in Azerbaijan, Sebastian Vettel misjudged his restart. He tried to move on Valtteri Bottas, and it didn't turn out very well. We'll see if Vettel is going to attempt any sort of overtaking on Hamilton into turn 1 on this restart in Spain. Hamilton is now the de facto safety car. We're just waiting for the Englishman to punch the throttle and try to pull away from the Ferrari behind. We are approaching the final chicane here in Sector 3. Lewis Hamilton very squirrely there at the back end, as is Sebastian Vettel. Hamilton appears to have let it go. And we are back racing in Barcelona. Hamilton leading from Vettel, from Bottas, from Raikkonen, from Verstappen, your top 5. Hamilton gets a good jump on the restart, waiting for timing and scoring to shake itself out as we begin lap 7 of the Spanish Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel nowhere near being able to attack Lewis Hamilton into turn 1. Valtteri Bottas had half a look at Vettel into turn 1. He decided to back out of it. Cameras picking up Fernando Alonso behind one of the Force Indias at the moment. I believe that was Esteban Ocon. Timing and scoring still not shaking out here at the end of the safety car period. On board with Fernando Alonso, he's wheel to wheel with a Force India. I believe that is Ocon, as we've said. Alonso makes the move. The next driver to fall into the clutches of Fernando Alonso is going to be Charles Leclerc in P9. Alonso is in P10, and he's definitely going to want to charge up through the field to put on a good show for the home crowd. Alonso is on the super soft tires. Leclerc is on the soft tires. Somebody is dipping a wheel there off in the background of turn 8. There is Fernando Alonso trying to go up the outside into turn 9 on Charles Leclerc. He thinks better of it. Superior traction on that Sauber for the moment. Alonso is going to be in striking position down the start-finish straight, though, if all holds well through the end of this lap. Charles Leclerc, big lockup into the second element of the Sector 3 chicane. Alonso really trying to get into the slipstream down the start-finish straight. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton sets fastest lap at 1:22.990. Alonso not close enough to attack Leclerc into turn 1. Meanwhile, Sergei Sirotkin has gotten past Brendan Hartley. They're both on the medium compound tires. The gap between Hamilton and Vettel at the front is 1.4 seconds. Hamilton fastest in Sector 1 at 23.229. Vettel responds with a 23.408. Hamilton Sector 2 a 30.687. Vettel a 30.908 in Sector 2. The Mercedes is faster than the Ferrari. The announcement from Race Control, DRS is enabled here on lap 8 of 66. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, resets fastest lap at 121.631. Sebastian Vettel that last time by a 122.259. The gap is 2.096 across start-finish. Hamilton is beginning to pull away from the Ferrari. In terms of strategy calls from Ferrari, well, we could see an undercut, we could see an overcut, we shall see. Meanwhile, Hamilton has set a new lap record in race conditions at this circuit, that 121.631 that we saw. Turn 2 incident involving car number 2, that is Van Dorn, under investigation, failing to stay to the left of the bollard at turn 2. I don't know what that is in reference to. That could be at the start of the race when the melee was occurring. We'll have to get a replay on that. That is Stoffel Van Dorn under investigation. We've gotten confirmation from the Renault team that Nico Hülkenberg is completely fine after his incident. Romain Grosjean has gone to the infield medical center for precautionary checks. Lewis Hamilton resets fastest lap at 121.386, and race control handing down a 5-second penalty to Stoffel van Dorn. Fernando Alonso with DRS on the Sauber of Charles Leclerc. He is still not able to close up on them. Remember, we were talking about their drag problems. Perhaps they still have them. And those dark clouds on the outside of turn 3, they are drawing ever closer. The wind is pushing those dark clouds right into turn 3. We're going to see some weather here before too long. Norman Robinson, that's a question that we have always been asking in Formula One. How much is the car and how much is the driver? I venture to say you could put any driver on the grid in that Mercedes and they would be challenging for race wins. That Mercedes is just so good. Although, it's not a given that any driver would win in that Mercedes. So even though the car is very good, and I dare say it is the second best car on the grid right now, I'm still thinking the Ferrari is actually the best car on the grid so far this season, the driver does add that final element. You could put me in that Mercedes, for instance, and once I had some time to acclimate myself, I would definitely get within the 107% time, but could I win the race? Probably not. However, yeah, there is a lot to be said for the car, especially in Formula One, but it's not everything. On board with Valtteri Bottas, and here are the halo graphics. The halo already very intrusive on our television screens, and now we've got these fluorescent blue overlays to make it even more intrusive. I understand what the Formula One graphics team are doing here. They're trying to utilize that dead space in the halo to show us something useful. However, it does really start to get in the way of our view of the racetrack. Those of you paying attention to these wide shots here at Catalunya, you will notice that the stark shadows are gone. The sun has been obscured by cloud cover. It's not particularly thick cloud cover yet, but it is getting darker here in Barcelona. Will we see rain? It is a distinct possibility. Meanwhile, Sergio Perez trying to look at one of the McLarens. That is Fernando Alonso, actually. That is not Sergio Perez either. That is Esteban Ocon. Graphics fail, FOM. That is Ocon trying to attack Fernando Alonso for P10. Alonso definitely just not having the pace. I thought he'd make easy work of Charles Leclerc in the Sauber, but it's not happening. Alonso now has lost that position to the Force India. At least I believe so. Timing and scoring is not quite matching up with what I'm seeing on the screen. We've got to confirm that. We are on board, I believe, with Sergio Perez. They're comparing his speed to Stoffel van Dorn in P14, yes. Stroll is in front of Perez. There it is. Alonso getting on the radio to McLaren asking, what's the forecast? It's getting quite dark. McLaren says the weather has not changed. Some drops are possible, but nothing on the radar. What kind of radar are they using? Because those clouds look fairly menacing in my opinion. Yes, Fernando Alonso still in front of Esteban Ocon. I beg your pardon. The graphics have caught up with the on-track action now. The gap between those two gentlemen is .857. Meanwhile, the gap at the front, Lewis Hamilton leads Sebastian Vettel by 5.488 on lap 13. Just starting lap 14 now. That's a good point. If it does start to rain, the person who makes the switch to the intermediate tires, if they are necessary, who makes that switch first is definitely going to be in the pound seat. Coming through turn 3 into turn 4, it looks a little bit brighter in this section of the circuit. However, as we turn through turns 5 and 6, we start to head toward that cloud cover again. That is approaching the start-finish straight from behind, relatively speaking, on board with Bottas through turn 8. The stark shadows are gone all around the circuit. The cloud cover is not quite moved overhead. The thickest part of the cloud cover is still not quite here, but it is getting darker. Johnny Ricciardo getting on the horn to the Red Bull guy saying, I'm just, you mind awfully, consider letting me past Max because I think I'm a little faster than him. That's quite a change of pace from 2 weeks ago in Baku. Working lap 15 of 66, the order at the sharp end of the field has remained unchanged. Hamilton leading Sebastian Vettel by 6.4 seconds. That Ferrari at a very big pace deficit relative to the Mercedes. Hamilton's last lap time of 121.574. Vettel's last time of 122.162. There is a pace deficit, Mercedes relative to Ferrari. The Ferrari, of course, being the loser in that battle. We're still got the world feed cameras focused here on Verstappen and Ricciardo. Ricciardo claims he's faster than Verstappen, but the gap between them has grown ever so slightly. Perhaps Ricciardo just a little bit gun-shy after what happened in Azerbaijan. Camera's now picking up Perez and Van Dorn. That fight is for P13. Perez has it. Van Dorn wants it. They are pretty much dead even on pace. Van Dorn with DRS into turn 1. He's not close enough to mount an attack. Yes, that is an interesting point. This is most certainly a Mercedes track. However, if you can design a car that works well around here, this circuit is very much a benchmark, and it's quite indicative of just generally the characteristics of circuits and individual corners that we get all throughout the Formula One World Championship. So if you can design a car that goes well here, most likely you've got a car that's going to go well in most places. Jonathan Straitman, the time penalty applied to Van Dorn was a 5-second penalty. It's unclear whether he'll serve that in a pit stop or if it'll just be added to his end of race time. We'll have to watch that story. Valtteri Bottas, meanwhile, goes purple in Sector 1 with the 22.970. Hamilton last time through Sector 1, 23.034. Sector 2 time for Hamilton, a 30.790. That's not particularly setting the world alight. Vettel responds with a personal best in Sector 2, a 30.732. Bottas, 30.775 in Sector 2. Ferrari going out into the pit lane. For whom? And what are the tires they're going to have? Looks like they're going to go on to the medium compound here. I'm seeing a white sidewall. One of the Ferraris in the pit lane. It is Sebastian Vettel. Vettel in for Ferrari. Our first scheduled pit stop on lap 18. 4 tires off, 4 tires on. Vettel is released back into the pit lane. Good stop by the Ferrari guys. 2.5 seconds exactly. Vettel was just losing time there in P2. Good move. Mercedes telling Bottas, push hard now. Obviously, they're trying to react to the Ferrari strategy. Sebastian Vettel on those medium tires. He could very easily be good to go to the end of this race here, starting from lap 18. We do know that the Ferrari can be very kind to its tires, and Sebastian Vettel is very good on old tires. We saw that in Bahrain. However, I don't know if they're going to be able to make that work, because if it does rain here, all of those dry weather strategies completely out the window. Some glorious slow-mo replays here of Lewis Hamilton going through the Sector 3 chicane. That Mercedes handling the curbing quite nicely, just seeing the vibrations come up through the tire sidewall and then propagating through the front suspension into the front wing. That Mercedes is definitely on point today. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton resets the race lap record around this place, 121.328. He is 9.6 seconds in front of Valtteri Bottas, his teammate. And I don't know about you guys, but it does appear that it is progressively getting darker still around this circuit. Ayrton, it does appear that Mercedes are trying to stay out here for a bit longer, obviously, than the Ferraris. They are on the soft compound tire, as was Sebastian Vettel. Their pace seems to be fine. Both Hamilton and Bottas, their pace is fine. They're both running in the mid-121s. Bottas just went purple in Sectors 1 and 2. Hamilton purple in Sector 3. Mercedes now in the pit lane here. What tires are going to be going on the Mercedes car? Do they try to put a set of super softs on? Or do they try to mirror Ferrari and put on a set of the mediums? Bottas in the pit lane. This is interesting. I didn't see a need for Mercedes to make a pit stop at this point. Medium tires going on the car of Valtteri Bottas. So they are trying to cover Sebastian Vettel there. Good stop by the Mercedes boys. Slightly slower, 3.9 seconds for Valtteri Bottas. Where does Bottas rejoin? They're trying the undercut on Sebastian Vettel with Valtteri Bottas. Vettel right there into turn 1. He takes that position from Valtteri Bottas. That is critical. We shall see what's going on here. In replay, Valtteri Bottas rejoining the racetrack. Sebastian Vettel coming up alongside. Vettel moves over into the pit exit to cover off Valtteri Bottas. Remember the IndyCar race at Long Beach a few weeks ago with Sebastian Bourdais making that overtake into turn one, going into the pit exit. The IndyCar stewards didn't particularly like that. Are we going to see any action from the Formula One stewards due to Sebastian Vettel doing this? We shouldn't. That is a move that is completely legal. We see drivers breaking into the pit exit all the time, particularly at the race starts. Hopefully the stewards just keep their mouths shut. Meanwhile, the camera's picking up Valtteri Bottas overtaking one of the Haas cars. That must be Kevin Magnussen, as Grosjean is out of the race. Bottas in P6 at the moment. Meanwhile, Hamilton's still leading this race. Hamilton radio saying there's a little bit of rain on my visor. Mercedes saying, okay. Lewis Hamilton is 14, almost 15 seconds ahead of Kimi Räikkönen, who has inherited second place at the moment. Hamilton resetting fastest lap at 121.157, still on the soft compound tires. Hamilton, I wouldn't be surprised if he is trying to wait for it to start raining so he could be the first one to switch onto the intermediate tires if it is necessary. However, as I speak, Sector 2 starts to brighten up a little bit. Some of those stark shadows have returned through turn 8 and 9. Seems to be a fleeting moment of brightness, though. Looking at the Ferrari pits, they are making tire pressure adjustments to the next set of tires to be fitted, most likely to Kimi Räikkönen. Christian Gaetan, I'm not entirely sure if Ferrari would try to do any sort of strategy calls influenced by weather because we're not seeing the weather yet. The golden rule of all of this is you must be on the right tires at all times, and right now I'm not entirely sure if that would pay any dividends to the McLaren in the pit lane. This is for Fernando Alonso. He has all four wheels up on this McLaren, unlike as he did 2 weeks ago at his first pit stop. 4 wheels off, 4 wheels on, onto the medium compound tires, and off you go, Fernando. Looks like he's going to be rejoining in P15. On board with Valtteri Bottas through Sector 3 now. There does not appear to be any water on this camera lens. Camera's picking up Sebastian Vettel now. And Valtteri Bottas is now within 2 seconds of Sebastian Vettel. The Ferrari is definitely off the pace today. Yes, Jonathan Straitman, FOM, having some graphics failures yet again. According to the graphics, Vettel and Bottas were doing 140 kilometers per hour through turn 3. For those of you who are not measuring in metric, 140 kilometers per hour is about 80 miles per hour. I think that these guys are going a little bit faster than that. Verstappen on the radio to Red Bull saying, "Box, box, box, no grip." Red Bull's reply, "Understood." Working lap 24 of 66. If it's going to rain, it had better get on with it because we need something to spice up the action here. Raikkonen radio. Ferrari telling Raikkonen, we need another few laps, gimme. Is that okay for you? He says, yep, good. Ferrari replies, good. Ferrari probably trying to see if it's going to rain. Kimi Raikkonen letting Max Verstappen through quite oddly through the final corner. Radio. Raikkonen on the radio saying, I have some issue, no power. Down the start-finish straight. He was so close to the pit entrance there, he decided to go past it. Raikkonen now running around at a reduced pace through turns 1 and 2. He moves into turn 3. It appears now that he is struggling for drive in that SF71H. He has slowed right down. At this rate, I'm not sure he's going to make it back to the pits. Raikkonen being told by Ferrari, state of charge, 8. And now stop the car. Raikkonen out of the race. Some sort of technical failure on the Ferrari. He has been instructed to stop the car. He is not stopping the car yet. Is he just looking for a fire marshal, or is he going to try to make it back to the pits? We'll see. Raikkonen appears to have recovered a little bit of performance all of a sudden. Meanwhile, Mercedes in the pit lane. Hamilton in the pits. Four wheels off, four wheels on. Onto the medium compound tires is Lewis Hamilton. We expect Max Verstappen will inherit the race lead momentarily. And indeed he does. Verstappen now leading Hamilton. Hamilton actually splitting the Red Bulls here on aggregate. Verstappen inherits the race lead. Hamilton second, Ricciardo in third. Kimi Raikkonen in P8 still at the moment. I believe he is still running. We'll see if he's actually managed to rectify that problem in the Ferrari. Meanwhile, in replay, this is Brendan Hartley and Charles Leclerc battling for P13. Leclerc comes out on top. On board with Carlos Sainz making his first pit stop of the afternoon. Tidy stop by the Renault boys. Kimi Raikkonen has made it to the pit lane, it does appear. Is this going to be a retirement? Yep, Ferrari putting the car on the movable jacks there. Raikkonen being pirouetted around in his pit box and pushed back into the garage. This does appear to be day done for Kimi Raikkonen. Yes, that is confirmed. Verstappen's still on the first set of tires. They are 29 laps old, and he's actually just gone purple in Sector 3. They're still plenty fast. As for Ferrari's halo mirrors, mounting the mirrors directly to the halo, I think they're fine. I would much rather see the teams try to do constructive things with the halo. If we must have halo, I want them to try and utilize it as much as possible, using it as another surface on the car to which they can mount things, rather than just have it sit there because it must be there. The Ferrari garage, Raikkonen getting out of the car. That is day done for Kimi Raikkonen. Sergio Perez in the Force India makes his first pit stop onto the medium compound tires, I believe. Yes, indeed. This could be a one-stop race. Sergei Sirotkin being lapped now by Max Verstappen, who is your race leader on aggregate at the moment. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton setting another new lap record around this place at 120.131. He is 2.1 seconds on the road behind Max Verstappen. On the count back to the pit stops, he is still effectively your race leader. Taking a look at the radar screens from one of the team's installments on the pit wall, not seeing any precipitation in the immediate vicinity of the circuit. The mediums may well be faster than the softs in these conditions. The circuit is very green. It rained overnight. We have Carlos Sainz and Marcus Ericsson going wheel to wheel in turn 1. They just barely avoid making contact with each other. Marcus Ericsson maintains P9 for the moment. But yes, that point on the medium tires perhaps being the better ones to be on. The circuit is green. It doesn't have too much rubber built up on it due to the overnight rain. Perhaps those medium tires, because they are a little bit less aggressive than the softer compounds, perhaps they are just the way to go right now. Ericsson and Sainz, a great display of skill from both of those guys. Wheel to wheel, but they did not make contact. Alain Prost looking on at that, not looking particularly impressed. I would say he's not impressed with what Carlos Sainz did there. He was weaving about wildly behind Marcus Ericsson. Certainly looked a little bit out of control there on the part of Carlos Sainz, but he made it work. Marcus Ericsson smartly moves to the inside into turn 1 once again to defend against Carlos Sainz. He does fend off that attack. This is actually some decent racing on the part of Marcus Ericsson. Sky Sports' Christian Horner asking Martin Brundle, what would you do for a stop strategy? Would you do a one-stop if you're Sebastian Vettel? Say, yeah, well, yeah, why not? Fernando Alonso is smelling blood here in that battle. Charles Leclerc trying to overtake Carlos Sainz. He is about a second behind the Spaniard in the Renault. Fernando Alonso immediately behind Charles Leclerc in P12. This was the battle we should have seen about 20 laps ago. Can the McLaren get in the slipstream of the Sauber, and then with the DRS advantage, can Fernando try to challenge the young Monegasque into turn 1? We're about to find out. He does not appear to be quite close enough at this point. Leclerc goes defensive toward the inside. No real attack from Fernando Alonso into turn 1. Yes, monitoring that gap at the front between Max Verstappen in P1 and Lewis Hamilton in P2. The gap has come down to 1.2 seconds between P1 and 2. Hamilton most likely is going to be able to challenge Max Verstappen very soon and will likely come out on top. Verstappen is on tires that are now 33 laps old, counting the formation lap, of course. Hamilton on the medium compound tire, but they are only 5 laps old. Replay on a Force India pit stop for Esteban Ocon. Problem on the right rear there, but they did what they had to do. They held the car. They let the mechanics do their thing. They did not get an unsafe release there. Looked to be some sort of issue on the rim on that right rear. There was some sort of obstruction blocking the threads from engaging on the wheel nut. Ericsson again defending from Carlos Sainz into turn 1. He is actually going very well here today. That is a breath of fresh air for the Swede. On board with Lewis Hamilton, he is tucked up behind Max Verstappen. Not quite close enough to attack. A little bit of oversteer actually coming toward the apex of turn 1 in that Mercedes. That's a little unusual to see. Some drops of rain there with the onboard camera on Lewis Hamilton. Nothing too appreciable. Of course, that's not to say that the little smudges on the camera lens are not actually oil or some other small amount of fluid from Verstappen's car. We are seeing these cars venting some oil this year as they're running around due to those new regulations about not allowing them to recirculate exhaust gas into the intake. As we come down the start-finish straight, it does appear to have brightened up once again here at the circuit. Some of those stark shadows have returned. Bottas radio. Mercedes telling Bottas, keep your head down for the moment. Looks like the Red Bulls are one stopping and they are a threat. We shall see. Kevin Magnussen in the pits for Haas. Looked to be a tidy pit stop from the Haas boys, 3.3 seconds. Returning to the onboard shot from Lewis Hamilton, he is still behind Max Verstappen, not close enough down start-finish here to make any sort of attack, I would believe. Verstappen radio. Verstappen telling Red Bull, if I get overtaken, I'm going to be losing a lot of time. Lance Stroll now between Verstappen and Hamilton. Meanwhile, Ricciardo in the pits. On to the medium compound tires. That is Ricciardo's first pit stop. 2.3 second stop by the Red Bull boys. Very quick. Yes, Jonathan Straitman, another graphical error from the Formula One TV team. I really have to say that we didn't see these kinds of things when Bernie was in charge of FOM. Yes, occasionally you would see the odd slip-up, but in Australia, when we had last name versus last name, and now we have miles per hour being labeled as kilometers per hour, we did not used to see things like that in Formula One TV coverage. Verstappen into the pits. Hamilton retakes the lead, which he has really held on aggregate the entire time. Verstappen stops in the pit box. Off with the old and on with the new medium compound tires. That is stop done for Max Verstappen here on lap 35. Brendan Hartley pulling out in front of the Red Bull. Undoubtedly they'll be allowing Verstappen through. Brendan Hartley ceding that position to Max Verstappen, who is actually a lap ahead of the Toro Rosso. Brendan Hartley classified in P14. On board with Sebastian Vettel heading through Sector 3. Currently classified in P2, he is 10.4 seconds down the road from Lewis Hamilton in P1. That Ferrari is not particularly well hooked up today. He seems to be losing a bit of grip on the front axle. Almost the entire circuit now bathed in bright sunshine once again. As the track temperatures increase due to the sunlight, it'll be interesting to see the evolution of these medium compound tires that pretty much everybody has blinked for now. Will they start to overheat? Will we have to make a second pit stop? We shall see. Bottas radio. Mercedes telling Bottas, let's try to get to the end of this race with this tire. What do you think about that? Bottas says the tires are pretty consistent. That should be a green light for Bottas to go to the end on the medium compound. I would also presume that's a green light for Lewis Hamilton to go to the medium tires to the end of this race. Fernando Alonso currently classified in P9 behind Charles Leclerc. Jonathan Straitman, we currently have no news on what caused Kimi Räikkönen's retirement. It appeared to be some sort of electronics gremlin, as they were telling him to try and manipulate the settings for the state of charge as he was out there running slowly. We don't have any more word than that at this point. The world feed just concluding some replays of the incidents at the start. That's typically indicative of a race that doesn't have too much going on. Sebastian Vettel through turn 2, he is having to fight that Ferrari. He is not at all in a good place with the handling of that car today. On board with Fernando Alonso through turn 8. He is trying to tuck up behind Charles Leclerc. He still cannot get close enough to that Sauber. The McLaren does look fairly well planted in the hands of Fernando Alonso. It's just not fast enough. Alonso with DRS down start finish on Charles Leclerc. He's still 7/10 behind though. That's not close enough. DRS down the start finish straight for the McLaren. That's only good for 0.2 of a second. Yes, that is a very good point. Charles Leclerc holding off Fernando Alonso now for 20-something laps. If you want to make a name for yourself in Formula 1, you've got to go wheel-to-wheel with Fernando Alonso, and Leclerc is keeping him well and truly behind at this point. I would measure that McLaren as being the car superior to the Sauber, but Leclerc making it work. Charles Leclerc getting a little bit squirrely there, heading through Sector 3 in the long right-hander. He holds on to it. Fernando Alonso is a little bit closer to the Sauber coming on to start-finish here. The gap is 0.65 of a second. DRS, of course, enabled for Fernando Alonso. He is slowly gaining on the back of that Sauber, but it's too little too late. Still unable to make a challenge. Again, DRS only good for about 2/10 down the start-finish straight on that McLaren. They still do have some drag issues. Yes, some notes on the race attendance here. I don't have any numbers on ticket sales or anything like that, but there are some grandstands here which are most decidedly looking less than full. Taking another look at the radar from one of the teams there, still no showers in the immediate vicinity of the circuit. We have a Force India pulling off in Sector 2, yellow flag display. That is Esteban Ocon. He has stopped someplace in Sector 2. No apparent damage on that car. It appears to be a mechanical failure of some sort. That is right on the approach to turn 5 as the track starts to head downhill before turning sharply left. Yes, in replay, smoke out the back of the Force India. Smoke issuing from the vicinity of the exhaust. Yes, that does appear to be some sort of an engine failure. Let's listen to the car. Yep, looked like a failure on the left bank of that V6 engine. Virtual safety car has been deployed so that they can recover that Force India. Mercedes in the pit lane here. Not quite in the pit lane, they're in their garage. They have a set of tires prepared. Meanwhile, on board with Sergei Sirotkin in replay, slowing down quite a lot because he's seeing the virtual safety car boards. Why? I'm not entirely sure why we're seeing that replay of Sergei Sirotkin. Robert Kubica looking on. Ferrari in the pit lane. Vettel is in the pits for Ferrari. Remember in Australia when Ferrari made an opportunistic move under the virtual safety car? Are they trying to do that again here? What do Ferrari do? They are onto the medium tires. Slight problem there on the right rear. However, they get it fitted and everything is fine. Vettel's pit stop was 5.6 seconds. The pressure is removed a little bit, though. Remember, we are under virtual safety car. Sebastian Vettel rejoining the circuit. It looks like he will resume behind Max Verstappen, and indeed he has done. He does have fresher tires. We will see what happens here. What do Mercedes do? Do Mercedes take the risk and try to pull a pit stop? I would think that they would have done it already if they were going to. Under virtual safety car, we are slowing down and there is no overtaking allowed. However, the gaps are maintained on track. Lewis Hamilton retains his gap of 3.1 seconds over Valtteri Bottas. We're now showing the track has been cleared. Virtual safety car period is ending. The track is clear. Virtual safety car is ending. We're waiting for the green flags to be displayed once again all around the circuit. Green flags are out. We are back racing in Barcelona. Fernando Alonso getting an early jump on Charles Leclerc down the start-finish straight. We have a yellow flag once again now in Sector 2. That's not going to be affecting Fernando Alonso's charge on Charles Leclerc into Turn 1. And Alonso makes the move on the Sauber. Charles Leclerc looking to struggle a little bit, getting his tires back up to full temperature. We're getting word of an incident between Verstappen and a Williams car. Verstappen tagged the back of a backmarker Williams. I believe that was Sergei Sirotkin. Verstappen now missing the left-hand side of his front wing. He's going to have to pit to recover that damage. And Sergei Sirotkin, meanwhile, getting a big tank slapper on out of Turn 9. He doesn't appear to have a puncture. No, all four tires are up on Sirotkin's Williams. Just appears to have lost it there on the apex of Turn 9. Sirotkin now into the pits. I'm presuming that was a tire change for Sirotkin. Meanwhile, Verstappen still running around with that front wing damage. He's in Sector 3. Do we see Verstappen dive into the pits, thus releasing Sebastian Vettel? We're about to find out. Verstappen does not take to the pit lane on this lap. Surely he's going to be struggling with that loss of front-end downforce. On board with Sergio Perez, overtaking Lance Stroll. Stroll, of course, being a lap down. That particular position was actually four-track position. Stroll's not a lap down relative to Perez. That's P10 for Sergio Perez. Marcus Ericsson will now be the next to attack Lance Stroll. On board with Max Verstappen, we're seeing a little bit of a vibration from this onboard camera. Verstappen radio. Red Bull telling Verstappen that the wing is structurally fine. As long as you're happy with the balance, we can keep it out. In replay, Max Verstappen, we're looking at that damage on the end plate, and we see the end plate fly off there in spectacular fashion off of the left side of that Red Bull. It just flew off directly onto the circuit. One of the Force Indias then hit that end plate. Sergio Perez was the Force India that hit that end plate there. He hit it with the right front. There does not appear to be any damage to his car. On board with Marcus Ericsson, he is trying to get past Lance Stroll for P11. Yes, the story at the front end of this field, it is actually quite depressing. Lewis Hamilton leads Valtteri Bottas by 14.8 seconds. Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas resets fastest lap of the race at 1:19.944. 10 seconds down the road from Bottas is Max Verstappen. 1.6 seconds down the road from Verstappen is Vettel in P4. 20 laps to go, working lap 46 of 66. It's gotten dark again around the circuit, but again, I don't think we're going to be seeing any rain. And how is this for a display of what's going on at the front of the field? The entire field up to P7 has gone at least one lap down. Sergei Sirotkin in P15, our last car classified, is 2 laps down. Yes, Alonso in that Mercedes, he would be about 17 days in front of the field at this point. World feed picking up Lewis Hamilton, having a very quiet day out in front. Just coming into turn 5. I suppose the other semi-storyline of this weekend is that the FIA have approved a set of aerodynamic changes. Meanwhile, we're seeing Stoffel Vandoorne down the start-finish straight going slowly. He's pulled off into the pit lane exit. This appears to be a retirement for the Belgian. Yes, Stoffel Vandoorne has brought the McLaren to a stop right in the pit lane exit there. The marshal's running toward him. I assume they'll be trying to push this car toward the pit lane. Lewis Hamilton resets fastest lap of 119.766, another new lap record. Seeing Stoffel Vandoorne there jumping out of the car, being very careful not to make contact with the ground while another part of his body is in contact with the car. The reason why he decided to get out of the car that way is because these cars obviously have high voltage hybrid systems on board, high voltage electrical systems, and if he were to ground himself, as in actually touch the ground while he is still in contact with the car, his body could become an electrical conduit for any static charge built up in the outer surfaces of the car to discharge into ground. Of course, electricity also always trying to find its ground state. Stoffel Vandoorne trying very hard not to become the wire, as it were, for that static charge to discharge. That McLaren apparently is safe to be touching now. The marshals are pushing it back into the pit lane. On board with Vandoorne, what happened here? Coming on to start-finish, just loses drive. That appears to be a gearbox problem. The engine is still running, the electronics on board look fine, but just no drive. It's as if somebody just cut the clutch in on him. The marshals do wear isolating gloves or insulating gloves. They're a thick rubber glove, but I'm not entirely sure how much they actually protect somebody from a high voltage shock. I imagine they offer some protection, but I don't know if they'd be able to act as a 100% insulator between that charge source and ground. Meanwhile, working lap 50 of 66, Lewis Hamilton still in the lead by 16.6 seconds over Valtteri Bottas, who is himself 10.4 seconds in front of Max Verstappen, who is himself 2 seconds in front of Sebastian Vettel. Fernando Alonso now going a lap down relative to Max Verstappen in P3. Jonathan Straitman, you're saying those gloves are rated for 15,000 volts? That's pretty substantial. I wonder what the amperage rating is on that. Fernando Alonso very smartly just diving on the anchors, allowing Sebastian Vettel to go past. Jack Barlow, that is an interesting question. Why are these cars so much faster than the 2017 cars despite having Halo, which should be adding some drag? The Halo does add quite a bit of drag, that's true. If you look on many of the cars, they are running these fairings over the top of the Halo trying to minimize the turbulence that it creates. What they're really trying to do there is two things. They're trying to streamline the airflow in toward the air snorkel, that's the air intake for the engine, and they're also trying to minimize turbulence in the cockpit so that the drivers' heads don't get buffeted around too much at speed. The Halo does add pretty significant drag, but at the same time, these teams are always developing their cars. There's actually not all that much in common between these cars and the 2017 cars in terms of their details, in terms of aerodynamic design. So Formula One, it is a development race day in and day out. These cars being 3 seconds a lap faster in qualifying than they were in 2017, rather, particularly in testing in 2017. It does show you the pace of development in these cars. 15 laps to go. Camera's picking up Lewis Hamilton going through turn 8. He's just having a serene Sunday drive. Ayrton, do I see Mercedes not winning this race somehow? No. Mercedes are definitely going to win this race. On board with Max Verstappen, we are still seeing those high-frequency vibrations from the onboard camera. I'm not entirely convinced that that's caused by the front wing damage. That could be just how the camera's been mounted today. Red Bull is happy with Verstappen's pace. He is still maintaining a 2.2-second gap over the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel. Jack Barlow, yes, if Hamilton gets a pole position in Monaco, that would be his 75th career pole position. Nobody else has done that. It's also somewhat hard to believe, for me at least, that Lewis Hamilton, this is his 11th season in Formula One. He started here, obviously, in 2007, and I remember that 2007 Australian Grand Prix as if it were yesterday. It's been a long time for Lewis Hamilton. Any news on that extra lever on Vettel's steering wheel? We haven't heard anything about it since Azerbaijan, at least nothing that I've seen. As we were speculating in Azerbaijan, I'm thinking that it has something to do with the MGU deploy settings. It's not a momentary on-off switch. It is a lever on a potentiometer setup, so he is able to modulate its functionality quite precisely, I would imagine, with his left hand. So I would say it's some sort of manual boost override on the MGU deploy. Jack Barlow, why do the 2018 engines sound like IndyCar engines? Well, the engines used in IndyCar and Formula One are superficially quite similar. They are both turbocharged V6 engines. The Formula One engines are single turbos. They are displacing 1.6 liters, and they're revving to about 12,000 RPM in race trim. The IndyCar engines, they're 2.2-liter twin-turbo V6 engines, so they're a bit larger than the Formula One engines, but they're also revving to about 12,000 RPM in race trim. So we're talking about V6 engines, both turbocharged, and with similar displacements and similar rev ranges, so that would account for the sounds being quite similar. Fernando Alonso on the radio to McLaren saying, black clouds in turn 3, how's the forecast? McLaren respond, the forecast has not changed. Fernando Alonso, just like the rest of us, is praying for rain in this race just so that we could get some action. Yes, those of you who want to see some V10 Formula One action, Jonathan Straitman, he is advertising his services for Assetto Corsa races. I'll also do the same. If you want to see some V10 Formula One action, I can give it to you. There's going to be a price, though. Where is everyone in the race? Well, Lewis Hamilton is 17.5 seconds in front of Valtteri Bottas, who is 10.1 seconds in front of Max Verstappen, who is 2.3 seconds in front of Sebastian Vettel, who is 17 seconds in front of Daniel Ricciardo. Your top 5, yeah, they're covered by 50-something seconds, maybe 60 seconds or so. That's pretty depressing. 5 cars running within 1 minute of each other. P6, Kevin Magnussen is 37 seconds behind Daniel Ricciardo and a lap down on Lewis Hamilton. Yes, we have some very big gaps. Sebastian Vettel getting the 10 laps to go message from Ferrari. There is absolutely no action anywhere in this field right now. In replay, seeing Sergio Perez in the Force India, just seeing some sparks coming out from the underside of the right-hand end plate of his front wing. Is that some damage that he sustained when he hit the left front end plate of Max Verstappen when it departed his car in spectacular fashion? Perhaps it is. It's not really causing any problems, though. What season was it with 9 different winners in the first 9 races? I remember 2012 was a very dynamic season at the start of the year. We had 8 different winners in the first 8 races. I don't know if it actually made it up to 9 for 9. I do remember Pastor Maldonado winning this race, the Spanish Grand Prix, in 2012. He was, I believe that was the 7th different winner for that year. 2007, it certainly was not 2007. We had Raikkonen and Alonso and Hamilton winning races, Massa as well. DRS enabled for Sergio Perez down the start-finish straight, trying to hunt down Charles Leclerc. Perez with slight front wing damage due to hitting that debris earlier on. He's not able to challenge the Monegasque into turn 1. We are nigh on 6 laps to go here in the 2018 Spanish Grand Prix. Hamilton leads from Bottas, from Verstappen, from Vettel, from Ricciardo, your top 5. The World Feed somewhat intrigued by the battle between Marcus Ericsson and Brendan Hartley for P12. Ericsson has it, Hartley wants it. The gap is 0.8 of a second between them. Peter Sauber looking on from the Sauber pits. What do I think about F1 coming to Miami? I knew this question would come up today. Well, Miami, it's a very cool city. I've been there a few times. I've always liked it there, and I've actually visited on several occasions the actual area where they are thinking of putting in this street circuit. It's the bridge that goes across the bay there to bring you into the port of Miami, where all the cruise ships dock. And I do have to say this about the roads in that part of Florida. They are very good. Florida has very good weather for most of the year. The temperatures are fairly stable there, so the roads are not subject to the same sort of wear that they would get through climatic conditions as they do in other places that have more temperate climates. It doesn't really get very cold in Florida. It very rarely snows, and even when it does, it's only a very little bit for a very short time. So the roads are in very good condition. They're very smooth. They're very nicely put together. So the road conditions are certainly good enough for Formula One cars to be running on them with all their downforce. However, I'm not entirely sure that track layout is what they need. They're utilizing that bridge that does connect mainland Miami to the port of Miami, and well, it's just basically a long straight line, and it's a multi-lane bridge, and it looks like they'd be running in both directions across that bridge. I would think that we would just see a whole bunch of big gaps starting to form, much like we're seeing today in Spain. The definition of a B-spec Formula One car, a B-spec just basically means it is the next major evolution of a car. So McLaren bringing a B-spec car this week, and it means that they are developing the car that they started this season with, but they have developed it enough to the point where they want to call it a completely different specification, hence the B-spec. We've seen this many times in Formula One history. Probably the most famous B-spec car is the Williams FW14B of 1992. In 1991, Williams debuted the FW14, or also sometimes called the FW14A, and that was their 1991 car. They updated it significantly for 1992. They added a new engine, an active suspension package. They improved the semi-automatic gearbox. And those rafts of changes were enough for them to call it a B-spec car, hence calling the 1992 car the FW14B. 5 laps to go. Carlos Sainz, saying that he has some sort of engine issue. He says he has no power. Renault responds, scenario 1. I wonder if that's some sort of a fail-safe mode. Meanwhile, Daniel Ricciardo resetting a new race lap record around this place, a 118.441. On board now with Sebastian Vettel in the 4th-placed Ferrari. Everything looks very under control here, just not Ferrari's day. Ayrton, how can Mercedes lose this now? They'd have to retire on lap 64. Ferrari lost their Santander sponsorship deal at the end of 2017, just the contract wasn't renewed. It's not the first time we've seen Ferrari looking relatively bare. I remember in 2007 and 2008, after Ferrari lost the rights to display their Marlboro branding on television, we saw the car looking predominantly red with not too many graphics on it. So it's not unprecedented for Ferrari to have a somewhat clean look on their car. It's not indicative of any financial issues, of course, for Ferrari. We haven't seen Ferrari run any Marlboro branding since 2007, I believe. The 2007 Chinese and Monaco Grand Prix were the last time that I can recall Ferrari actually running a Marlboro logo on their car. Two laps to go here in this 2018 Spanish Grand Prix. Driver of the Day voting is now open for those of you who are engaged in that sort of thing. Yes, Ferrari, still sponsored by Philip Morris, which of course is the parent company of the Marlboro cigarette brand. They've just not been able to run any of those logos in about the last 10 years. The reason why I tend not to use the tobacco liveries in a lot of my videos is mostly because I'm anticipating the future of free speech restriction on the internet. I'm thinking that perhaps someday in the future those videos may be banned because I'm advertising immoral products or something, because the internet all of a sudden thinks it's the most moral institution on the planet, despite it being really the Wild West of society. So that's why I don't run the tobacco liveries all that often. Goodyear tires in Formula 1. The last year for Goodyear in Formula 1, I believe, was 1997. Those big Goodyear slicks that we saw that year. Yes, political correctness. Don't get me started on political correctness, because I have some very politically incorrect opinions about political correctness. Anyway, the final lap getting underway here. Lewis Hamilton with a 1:19.425 last time around. Valtteri Bottas last time around 20.5 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. 1:21.130 was his lap time. Sebastian Vettel in P4 just starting the final lap now. We haven't picked up Lewis Hamilton yet on the world feed. Lewis Hamilton on board with him now, moving through Sector 3, just approaching the chicane. Hamilton is behind Sergio Perez here on track, however he is a lap down. Lewis Hamilton through the final corner to take the checkered flag to win the 2018 Spanish Grand Prix to the tune of 20.969 seconds over his teammate Valtteri Bottas in the same car. We're just waiting for that final gap to Bottas once he crosses start-finish. He still has not made it to the final corner. Now Valtteri Bottas goes around the final corner and crosses the line, taking the checkered flag, waiting for that final interval on timing and scoring. Brendan Hartley going very slowly across the line to finish in P12 and a lap down. Daniel Ricciardo now coming through, taking 5th place. Toro Rosso stops immediately after the start-finish line. Carlos Sainz taking P7 ahead of Fernando Alonso in P8. The final interval between Hamilton and Bottas, well over 21 seconds. We're still waiting on a final readout. And with that, Mercedes take their first 1-2 finish of the year. Max Verstappen will be somewhat consoled by taking the final podium position. Sebastian Vettel once again finishes in 4th. The final interval, according to the official timesheets, is 20.593 between Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas, P1 and 2. Max Verstappen finishes 26 seconds down the road. Sebastian Vettel 27.5. Daniel Ricciardo in P5 finishes 50 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. I would definitely say that the Driver of the Day award should go to Charles Leclerc. He did an absolutely brilliant job fighting with Fernando Alonso in the middle of that race. Jack Barlow, yes, I did say in that review that Ferrari were very much traditionalists, and they tried to stay with the V12 as long as they possibly could, and they did run V12s all the way to the end of the 1995 season. The reason why they did not continue to use a V10 in 2006 was because the rules were changed. Everybody had to run V8 engines. The exception was made for Minardi at the end of 2005 because Minardi didn't have the development budget to develop a V8 engine of their own. The Minardi team was sold at the end of 2005 to Red Bull, who rebranded it as Scuderia Toro Rosso for 2006. That rule that was actually instituted for Minardi to allow them to use a 2005 spec V10 was carried over, grandfathered in if you would like, for Toro Rosso. So Red Bull already had an engine for their Toro Rosso team for 2006. They ran that Rev Limited V10 engine in 2006. And now we have a format change to our post-race interviews. Paul DiResta is in Parc Fermé already, and we're going to be talking to whichever driver gets to him first. I have no idea why they've decided to do this with the interview format. It all seems rather abrupt and somewhat unprofessional. It's much better to see these drivers talking on the podium. I think it's better, too, because the fans can actually see them from the grandstands. Lewis Hamilton not saying anything of particular note there in the interview. Valtteri Bottas now just spouting the team talking points about how happy he is to finish second once again. Jack Barlow, the first full Formula One season that I watched was 2006. I started watching Formula One in 2005. The first race I watched was actually Monaco in 2005. My first full season was 2006. Ayrton, if F1 were to switch to V10 engines for 2021, that would be the most amazing thing that has ever happened in all of our collective lives. However, it's not going to happen. We can just forget about that right now. I do have to say, doing the interviews before the podium ceremony, it kind of takes all the air out of the balloon. Part of the podium build-up is the anticipation of hearing what the drivers have to say, and now we don't have that. Unfortunately, the return of the V10 to Formula 1, it's not going to happen because Formula 1 management and the FIA think that Formula 1 is supposed to be about being environmentally friendly for some reason. So the V10 engines, they were only getting about 25-30% thermal efficiency even in 2005 in their latest spec. These V6s are getting over 50% thermal efficiency, so if they want to say that they have the greenest sport in the world, the V10 won't do that for them. Being politically conscious and politically correct is more important than providing good racing. Anyway, stand by for the anthems of Germany and Great Britain. And now, at the conclusion of this podium ceremony, the trophies being presented now. We don't have interviews forthcoming here, so it kind of all falls flat. Dr. Dieter Zetsche there, looking on from the pit lane. He, of course, is the president of Mercedes-Benz. I do have to say, conspicuously absent from those $15,000 bottles of champagne are the GoPro cameras. Not seeing them. What would it take to save the spectacle of this sport? It would take a lot. It would take some significant changes, but not in the areas that I think a lot of you may be thinking about. I don't think there's any real need to change the cars, and as I see, as I'm speaking here, there is a GoPro on Lewis Hamilton's $15,000 bottle of champagne. Anyway, some of the changes that would have to be made to this sport. I don't think there's really a need to change the cars too significantly. There is a need to change the engines. If they want to keep the V6 engines, what they need to do is make them twin turbo. They need to get rid of the fuel flow limit so that we can get the full 15,000 RPM. They also need to get rid of grid penalties for mechanical failures and things like that, because a mechanical failure is not a driver's fault. Why should we be deprived of seeing a driver get a good grid spot just because his car failed? That doesn't make sense to me. We also need to get rid of a lot of the regulations surrounding pit stops. I think that they've become a bit too draconian with things such as unsafe releases. Common sense should be enough for these guys to govern themselves in the pit lane. We also need to get rid of some of the austerity that we see in Parc Fermé, like for example doing these interviews immediately in Parc Fermé. It just completely takes the lead out of the balloon for the podium ceremony, which of course is a long-standing Formula One tradition, and I think that needs to be venerated, so to speak. We do need to get rid of halo. It just makes the cars look ugly. At the same time, though, we just need to relax the rules on racing as well in terms of the sorts of maneuvers that these guys can do. The cars are plenty safe. The circuits are plenty safe. We need to let the drivers be a bit more aggressive. We need the teams to be free to use whatever tire compounds they want at any point in the race. We need to get rid of this 2 compound per race rule. There are a few things that need to change, but nothing too drastic. Things that could be implemented right now for the most part. Any news about Michael Schumacher? Well, if you have any, I'd love to know it. There is no official news about Michael Schumacher. It's over 4 years now since he suffered traumatic brain injuries in a skiing accident in Switzerland. We haven't really gotten any information about him since. The most we know is that he's out of a coma, for what that's worth, and we do not know if he is able to be aware of his surroundings. We don't know if he can speak. We know that he cannot walk. It's just not a very good story for Michael Schumacher. The next Formula One race is going to be between May 25th and May 27th from Monaco. May 27th, of course, the Monaco Grand Prix will get underway. Monaco is a bit of an interesting Grand Prix weekend because we do our first 2 free practice sessions on Thursday in the Principality. Friday is a traditional holiday. It's a bank holiday in Monaco, so no racing activity on the Friday. So our practice sessions will be taking place on Thursday for the Monaco Grand Prix. The rest of the Grand Prix weekend will resume as normal from Saturday with FP3 and qualifying, and then the race on Sunday. In terms of making these cars get a little bit closer on track, I think it would be cool if we could get a customer power unit, in other words, a customer engine in the mix here for some smaller teams to make it on the grid, fill the field out a little bit more. I would not be opposed to that being a V8 engine in the 2013 spec, just so that we could get a car with a reasonably competitive engine out there, sort of like the Cosworth DFV was in the 70s and 80s. We need more teams in this sport. We need to lower the costs for newcomers to get into the sport, and we also need to deal with the situation of the front runners getting so much more money than everybody else, so that you always will get this lopsided competition where the front runners will always remain the front runners because they have so much more money than everybody else. At this point, though, my verdict on the 2018 Spanish Grand Prix, it was the most boring race of the year. Bar none. People said Australia was boring, and now in 2019 we're going to get new front wing regulations in reaction to the lack of overtaking in Australia, which is a complete knee-jerk in my opinion. This race was extremely boring as well, not because there was a lack of overtaking, but because the gap from P1 to P2 was nearly 21 seconds, and they were driving the same car. Something is very wrong there. We need some sort of action. There really wasn't much action all throughout the field today. And it had nothing to do with the fact that Raikkonen retired. It was just everybody was so strung out here, and there are a lot of high-speed corners around this circuit. I know it's difficult for cars to follow nose to tail, but you could put anything you want on the front end of these cars, and they're still not going to be able to follow closely when one car is 21 seconds across the line before P2, and they're the same car. Something is very wrong there. In terms of our World Championship standings, in the Drivers' Championship, Lewis Hamilton pulls away a bit over Sebastian Vettel. He has 95 points over Sebastian Vettel's 78. P3 in the Drivers' Championship, Valtteri Bottas with 58 on the board. P4, Kimi Raikkonen with 48 on the board. He is down from P3 due to his retirement today, no points. Danny Ricciardo in P5 with 47 points. Max Verstappen in P6 with 33. Fernando Alonso, P7 in the driver's standings with 32 points. Nico Hülkenberg, P8 with 22. Kevin Magnussen moves up into P9 in the Drivers' Championship with 19 points. Carlos Sainz in P10 with 19 points as well. P11 in the driver's standings for Sergio Perez with 17 points on the board. P12 is Pierre Gasly with 12 points. 13th in the driver's standings, Charles Leclerc with 9 on the board. Stoffel Vandoorne in P14 with 8. Stroll in 15th with 4. Ericsson in 16th with 2, Ocon in 17th with 1, Brendan Hartley in 18th with 1. Roman Grosjean and Sergei Sirotkin still have yet to score points this year. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes lead the Constructors' Championship, scoring 43 cool points today, bringing their total to 153. Ferrari in P2 in the Constructors with 126 points on the board. Aston Martin Red Bull in P3 with 80 points on the board. Renault in P4 with 41. McLaren in P5 with 40. Haas in P6 with 19. Big gap there. Force India in 7th with 18. P8, Toro Rosso with 13 points. Sauber in P9 with 11. And Williams bringing up the rear in P10 with 4 points on the board. Yes, the chicane was put into Sector 3 at the Catalunya circuit in 2007. They wanted to lower cornering speeds through the final corner, so yes, it's in the name of safety. Yes, for there to be an interesting race going on at Monaco with the historic races, that's really saying something. That Formula One cars from 30 years ago and beyond give a better show than the current ones. That's really, really terrible for PR. At this point, we'll open it up to questions in the last couple of minutes here, and then we'll be signing off, because really, I have nothing to talk about after this race. I will say what got me into Formula One in the first place was just the sheer amount of technical prowess in the cars. It was that. It was also the sound of those cars. I remember watching that 2005 Monaco Grand Prix and hearing those engines and wondering what the hell they were, because I had never heard a car sound like that before. I initially thought that they were running gas turbines of some sort because I had never heard an engine make a sound like that. I had no idea that a piston engine could possibly rev that high, but as I learned more about what I was seeing, then I realized, wait, they're running V10s in there with pistons and crankshafts and valves and things, and it started from there in terms of my love of this sport and learning about how it all works, and I just don't really see that anymore. Everything I have seen the FIA do in the last 12, 13 odd years of watching this sport has been aimed at making the car slower and the racing less competitive, and it's really disheartening to see. It's why this year I've started to follow IndyCar a whole lot more closely, and we're seeing nicer looking cars, and we're seeing better racing consistently in IndyCar. On street circuits, on permanent road circuits, and on ovals, they are outperforming Formula One in every area in terms of the spectacle. Yes, I have to agree with you. You know, what got me into F1, also in addition to the sound of the car, was also the looks. Those 2005 cars, they looked so cool, with the front wings being low and relatively narrow, the rear wings being wide and low as well, with all the aerodynamic appendages that they had running around topside, and the things that they were doing, particularly the McLarens that year, with they were blowing the rear bodywork with their exhaust, and they were getting some downforce via the Quanda effect that way. It was so cool. Plus, the cars were so quick. It really was something to behold, but it's just not there anymore. Should you be getting your GCSCs going right now? Yes, you should definitely start applying your knowledge and your energies into a productive pursuit at this point. There's nothing more happening here. Yep, that is actually a good point. Racetracks nowadays have sound restrictions. As crazy as that sounds, pun intended, yes, they have sound restrictions. Your car can only be so loud nowadays. It's amazingly ridiculous. Why would a racetrack not allow you to be too loud? I don't understand it, but that's what they're doing. The EU is going to limit road cars to 75 decibels in 2021, apparently. That is not too much louder than a typical civil conversation. I do have to say, the European Union is the most ridiculous political institution ever to exist. It's even worse than the United Nations, if you could believe that. In terms of the UK deciding to pull out of the EU, I completely agree with that. It's killing their economy, it's killing their national security, it's killing their jobs, it's killing everything in the UK, and thankfully they've decided to exercise some discretion and pull out of there. It was a good idea in theory, particularly with the Schengen Treaty allowing free passage throughout continental Europe, but it just doesn't work. The world has changed, and that's not a bad thing. Things change all the time. If things never changed, we would be stagnant and we would never advance as a society and as a species, but The EU, it's so heavy-handed. Sovereignty, in terms of national sovereignty, is effectively gone in continental Europe, and that's also something which I believe is a threat to the larger stability of the world. So yes, it's a mess, and the fact that a multinational institution like the EU can get involved with legislation governing how loud a car can get, that is a definite indicator of governmental overreach. Yeah, the European Union, it was a good idea in theory, and of course it was conceived in the years following World War II, when everyone thought, okay, now we've gotten that out of our system, we're going to be united now in the sake of productivity and peace and brotherhood and all that stuff, and it's a wonderful sentiment, and it's something that I wish could actually happen in our world. But we're finding time and time again that people just don't get along with each other all the time, and that's not a bad thing. It's just what we do. So we need to have systems in place that allow for us to just do our own thing on our own sometimes, and the European Union does not allow for that. See, racing has always been a testing ground for manufacturers to a degree. It's just that it was never conceived to be as its primary goal to be a testing ground for manufacturers. Of course, the big auto manufacturers that have been involved in racing, they've used technology that they've developed in their race cars on their road cars. But now, Formula One has approached its racing as primarily focused on developing technologies for road cars. That's not what we're supposed to be watching here. We're supposed to be watching a racing series. We're not supposed to be watching research and development for Mercedes, which is what Formula One has turned into. At any rate, if any of you here would like to continue the conversation with me, please do find me on Twitter at Ferrariman601YT. I'll reiterate that here in the chat in a moment. If you do want to have a chat with me on Twitter about what we're seeing here, I am going to be calling it quits here for the live stream, as, well, it's a Sunday morning here, and, well, I do have stuff to take care of today. So I do thank you all very, very much for watching. Please do find me on Twitter if you do have anything else to say to me. So until next time for the Monaco Grand Prix, we will be seeing you soon. In the meantime, we do have some content coming to the channel today in just a few minutes' time, actually. We do have a big review video coming out, so hopefully you do all enjoy that. Until next time from Monaco, Ferrariman601 saying thank you all very, very much for watching, and we will see you soon.